here to discuss the sentencing of Jayana Webb, a DUI driver who killed 2 state troopers and a pedestrian. It's one of the most tragic, heart-wrenching cases that I have ever seen, especially involving vehicular deaths and DUI. It's an absolutely heartbreaking case at every possible level. I want to start out by identifying some of the folks who will be speaking today and also others who are attending. First and foremost, we have the wives of the troopers and a sister of the civilian who were killed. We have Brittany Sisca, who is here. She is the wife of Trooper Branden Sisca. We have Stephanie Mack, who is here, and she is the wife of Trooper Martin F. Mack III. Ida Sierra is here. She is the sister of the civilian, Reyes Rivera Oliveras. With us as well are Gabrielle Rainey, Director of Victim Witness Services at the Anti-Violence Partnership of Philadelphia. And we also have with us Pennsylvania State Trooper Vincent Scardelli, a partner as a trooper with Branden Sisca, who is present as well. Those who will be speaking today, I'll speak briefly. We have State Police Captain Gerard McShay, Commanding Officer of Troop K. We have State Police Lieutenant Charles Burkhart, Station Commander for Troop L. ADA Joanne Pescator, who of course is the Supervisor of the Homicide Non-Fatal Shooting Unit of the Philadelphia DA's office, is here. ADA Jeffrey Hojnowski, who is an Assistant Supervisor in the Homicide Non-Fatal Shooting Unit, is here as well. I do have just a couple comments, and then we will move on to hear from some of the other speakers. The conviction and sentence for this defendant hold her accountable for her reckless, criminal, violent actions on the night of March the 21st of 2022. Sadly, and I've said this many times and I'll say it again, the criminal legal system has room for improvement when it comes to applying even-handed criminal accountability for death and injury that is caused by drivers, especially drunk drivers, as opposed to other violent conduct, such as gun violence. As many of you in the press may recall, this is a case in which at the preliminary hearing, a municipal court judge dismissed all 3 third-degree murder counts that we had brought and charged against Jayana Webb in this case. Our office disagreed. Respectfully, we immediately filed an appeal, and those charges were reinstated by a court of common pleas judge. Last Wednesday, just weeks before we were scheduled to go to a jury trial, Ms. Webb pleaded guilty to 3 counts of third-degree murder, along with 3 counts of homicide by vehicle while DUI, and 1 count of DUI. Unfortunately, this is not the only example we have of unequally applied accountability for murder by vehicle. Frederick Falcon is an individual we charged for driving and killing Jason Corona, a Virginia man, on November the 20th, 2022, in a parking lot outside of a Northeast Philadelphia restaurant. A municipal court judge in that matter dismissed the third-degree murder and every other charge but one, leaving the scene of an accident was what was left. Again, my office immediately applied to reinstate all those charges, and a court of common pleas judge granted our motion last July. Incidentally, Mr. Corona was also part of a law enforcement family. His father's a detective in Spotsylvania County, Virginia. Our homicide NFS unit is preparing to take defendant Falcon to trial, likely early next year. Just as it is with gun violence, the U.S. is an outlier among all wealthy nations in our failure to prevent against death by car or traffic violence. There is an important op-ed in the Inquirer today, and I encourage you all to read it. I have a copy of it right here, by Sarah Clark Stewart of the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, and LaTanya Bird and Laura Fredericks, who are 2 mothers who lost children to traffic violence. I have met with these folks to discuss how the criminal legal system can be a better partner in traffic violence prevention, how we can improve some of the criminal statutes in this area, which frankly I think could use some improvement. And it is my hope that as we move into the next year, we will be able to do more of that. Unlike gun violence, which is trending downward in a very positive way in Philadelphia, despite the harm it is causing and continues to cause, it is trending downward. Traffic violence remains stubbornly high this year compared with last year. According to the op-ed, and this is a quote, as of Wednesday, at least 116 people have died this year from traffic violence in Philadelphia. This includes 52 pedestrians, 45 motorists, 11 motorcyclists, 2 e-scooter riders, and 10 bicyclists. Every one of those deaths is preventable. Every one of these deaths is a failure to implement policy and infrastructure solutions that many other wealthy nations have long adopted to keep our roadways safe for all, particularly kids, disabled people, and the elderly. With that, I would like to call up ADA Jayana Webb, Chief of our Homicide Non-Fatal Shooting Unit, and ADA Jeff Hojanowski. I know sometimes it's confusing because the Philadelphia Police Department has units that have almost the same names, but these are attorneys, these are prosecutors. They work in this office, and this is the work that they do. They will explain details of the case, and then I will come up again to introduce Captain McShay and Lieutenant Burkhart, who will speak, and who will, as I understand it, also be standing with Trooper Scardelli. ADA Pescator and Hojanowski.
Thank you, Mr. Krasner. Thank you, everyone. Just really here to talk about how we got to where we're at today. As many of you know, last Wednesday, Ms. Webb did enter a negotiated guilty plea to 3 counts of murder to 3rd degree, 3 counts of homicide by vehicle while DUI, and 1 count of DUI. The total sentence that was agreed upon by counsel, defense counsel, and the district attorney's office, and accepted by Judge McDermott was 27 and a half to 60 years. What that means is that at minimum, Ms. Webb will serve no less than 27 and a half years, at which point she would become eligible for parole. There's no guarantee she would get out at her minimum. She could very well serve a full 60 years, depending on a lot of different factors, including her behavior while incarcerated. This has been weeks, months of getting to this point, of conversations with family members of the victims in this case, counsel, with meetings internally in the district attorney's office, and ultimately culminating into this negotiated guilty plea, which I think is the best outcome for all parties, really. Conversations I've had with some of the family members that are here, and including some of the troopers, some who are here, some who are not. The best outcome was to try to avoid having to put these people, the families and the troopers, through that horrific day again. And undoubtedly, with the evidence that we had, some of the pictures and some of the video that we had would have almost certainly re-traumatized some of the people, the troopers who responded, and the family members, and we were trying our best to avoid having to do that. In fact, that was preference for some of the family members to avoid doing that, to having to put everyone through that again, which is how we kind of got to this point. I do want to thank and acknowledge a couple people who helped along the way, because while I stand here before you, there are other people who were working behind the scenes and did a lot of work on this case to get us to where we're at today. One of those people is Jessica Chung, who is an attorney with the district attorney's office, who did a lot of work on this case and got it to where we are today. Another is Dave Osborne, who was an attorney at the time that this case was pending and going through litigation, who also did a lot of work on this case. I want to thank Captain McShay, Lieutenant Burkhart, who did a fantastic job and really supported us throughout this. Really, were there whenever we needed anything. We're willing to help and go above and beyond to serve us and to help us prepare for this case. I want to thank the rest of the members of Troop K and Troop L, both the Philadelphia Barracks for Troop K and the Media Barracks, who also helped out with this case and responded to the scene. They did a fantastic job in helping this case along. Obviously, Ms. Pescator was instrumental in getting Ms. Jayana Webb charged. She did a fantastic job as well. I do want to acknowledge the family members here who have been great, have been have made my job a lot easier. This could have been a lot more difficult experience for me and for the district attorney's office, but they've been fantastic, nothing but gracious, and I do want to acknowledge Steph and Brett and Ida, because they've been fantastic. I also want to acknowledge Gabrielle Rainey behind me. because she has been really the glue that's been keeping everything together, keeping the district attorney's office in contact with the families and keeping everything moving towards a positive outcome, positive resolution for everyone. So that's essentially how we got here today, the decision, and it's a decision I think that's fair, and that we can walk away and everyone seems to be okay with. At least they can sleep at night knowing that Ms. Webb will serve at least 27 and a half years, and there's no likelihood that there's ever going to be appeals or extensive appeals. This is going to be a conviction that stands over time, and it will help them transition into the next phase of healing, which is what we really want them to be able to do, and care for their families and provide for their families.
I just want to say that thanks to Jeff, who stepped in and took this case over, and it was a total group effort, as every case we prosecute here is. It's not just us who you see in front of the cameras. It's the police officers, the troopers, the families that we represent and try and get through such tragedies as this. These poor families have been through it. They're still going through it. The defendant, as of today, she's coming back next week to see if her house arrest was actually approved. So it's just one more hurdle that they have to go through. But we've been there with them, and we will continue to stand next to them until this case is finally done.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, we will take questions toward the end. It is now my pleasure, in this sad time, to invite up Captain Gerard McShay and Lieutenant Charles Burkhart to say a few words. Standing with them will be Trooper Vincent Scardelli, who has been a partner of Branden Sisca in the past. I also want to say that they have been remarkable partners with this office, colleagues, in trying to hold everyone accountable in ways that are even-handed. We have even gone so far as to, on 2 separate occasions, bring homicide charges on cases that were nearly 30 years old through some of the excellent cold case work that was done by the troopers, and we deal with them all the time on much more ordinary, shall I say, or normal types of cases. But it is my pleasure to introduce Captain McShay and Lieutenant Burkhart, who will be accompanied by Trooper Scardelli.
Good morning. I'm not going to speak about the investigation itself. That's more Lieutenant Burkhart's area of expertise, but I did want to take the opportunity to thank all the people that got us to where we're at today. March 21st, 2022 was a terrible day. 3 people were killed on 95, 2 of which were Pennsylvania State Trooper Martin Mack and Branden T. Sisca. This was devastating to us as an organization, and specifically to us in the Philadelphia station. But despite that emotion and those hard times, the members recognized that it was time to complete an investigation so that the person responsible could be held accountable. That started with the squad, who were the first people on scene, which included Trooper Scardelli here to my right, stabilizing the scene and preserving the evidence. And then members like Lieutenant Burkhart stepped in and started their accident reconstruction. Our criminal investigation unit stepped in and started interviews. It was just a litany of people that got involved that, created or developed an investigation or created a case that, was able to substantiate the charges of murder, which was eventually approved by the district attorney's office. And then from that point, once the charges were filed, the DA's office was great. ADA Pescator, Hajanowski, Osborne, and Chung, worked tirelessly on this. Countless hours, phone calls going back and forth to make sure that we got to this moment where someone was held accountable for the actions. We're held accountable for the 3 lives that were taken on the highway that day. And it's just our hope that this sends a message, or that it shows that there are consequences with your actions. Driving under the influence isn't a joke. It can devastate so many lives. Look at the 3 family members behind us, and hopefully outcomes like this can make people think twice and help to prevent something like this occurring again.
Morning. I also want to thank the District Attorney's Office for charging this case in the manner in which they did from the outset, and their diligent prosecution over the last year and a half. In the Pennsylvania State Police, the patrol trooper is the backbone of our organization, and especially working in an area like Philadelphia, one looming concern all the time is being involved in a struck-by incident. Unfortunately, over the years, we've seen tow operators, highway maintenance personnel, firefighters, police officers, and now Pennsylvania State troopers that are killed in the line of duty while responding to a scene just trying to help someone in distress. And this incident's just been an all too real reminder, again, of the threats that we face every day in law enforcement. When the Pennsylvania State Police investigates a traffic homicide, it triggers a very detailed, lengthy investigation, which is highly technical in nature. And when that happens, it creates volumes of evidence that has to be secured, processed, and analyzed later for trial. As part of that, as Kathy McShade alluded to, we had assistance from a team effort from the Pennsylvania State Police with all of our specialized units. But also, part and parcel to that was we were handed hours upon hours of body cam footage from the Philadelphia Police Department and the officers who responded that night. Working in Troop K Philadelphia, we've been very blessed over the years to have an outstanding working relationship with the Philadelphia Police Department, and watching the body cam footage that evening when they responded to a scene that was obviously chaotic, highly emotionally charged, they performed, as they always do, admirably, and we're appreciative for that. Responding to a line of duty death scene is probably one of the worst things you could ever see in law enforcement. Hope to never see it. And to see 2 state troopers killed in the line of duty that evening, on top of Mr. Oliveras being killed, is something that's obviously traumatic, and we, again, express our appreciation for their efforts that evening. Upon conclusion of a traffic homicide investigation, we will package as best we can and put our best work product together for the County District Attorney's Office. At that point, it is essentially in the hands of the district attorneys, and in this case, we've been very blessed to have such highly talented, passionate, dedicated, gracious prosecutors in the form of Joe Pescator, Jess Chung, Dave Osborne, and also Jeff Anowski. At the end, when you go to thank them, they quickly dismiss it and say, we're just doing our job. And it is true, they are doing their job, but we have to note that their job is often difficult and very trying situations at times, and it's been a pleasure to work with them in our unified goal to hopefully obtain some measure of justice for Troopers Mack and Sisca, and also Mr. Oliveras.
All right, just a couple comments, and then we'll go to Q&A. I don't think I'd be doing my job unless I said to young people, to any person, get off your phone. If you're in a car, get off your phone. Do not text, do not make calls. For God's sakes, do not go on social media when you are driving a car. The amount of destruction here is virtually endless. The number of children affected is enormous. The lives are permanently changed for everybody who knew these people. It's horrifying. Point 2, which should be pretty obvious, do not drive if there's any possibility you are in any way intoxicated. This has become completely preventable, 100% unnecessary. There are cabs, there are friends, there is Lyft, there is Uber. Why on earth would anyone drive terribly intoxicated, simultaneously doing social media bragging about it? Why would anyone do this? You want attention? This is not the attention you want. You want to be known? This is not how you want to be known. This is the destruction of your and every other life that gets near you. So please, please, all of life is not about being noticed. All of life is not about partying. You want to party? Let somebody else drive. You want to be on social media? Don't do it when you're driving. Please. All right. Having said that, are there questions? I guess we'll just start left to right, if that's okay. May I start all the way over here?
I'm sorry. My name is Sherry. I was wondering, you mentioned that house arrest is being considered. Is that for Jayana? It hasn't been approved, but it's a possibility then?
Well, I'll give a short answer, and then I'll invite my prosecutors to give the longer answer. But this is a situation in which the defendant is currently pregnant, and the defense has made a request that she be permitted to have the baby and bond with the baby briefly before going into custody. The judge has entertained that with certain conditions. Obviously, people may have very complicated feelings about it, but one thing we all know is this child didn't do anything wrong. So it is in the discretion of the court to permit that if the court chooses to do so. Do you have any further comment? No? Okay. Thank you. Anything? No? Yes, please.
District Attorney Krasner, can you explain the process of refiling those third-degree murder charges, in that it took time, but ultimately achieved the desired outcome of you, your prosecutors, and families you represent?
Sure. So I referenced earlier that I don't feel like the criminal laws adequately adjust traffic violence generally, or DUI deaths, DUI injuries adequately. This partly flows from the history of criminal justice being primarily about your mental state, and it's about your intent, or your recklessness, or your wildness, all of which involve different levels of culpability. Obviously, it's simpler when a judge looks at someone who pulls out a gun, points the gun at someone else's heart, and pulls the trigger to see the intent that is involved there. It has always been more complicated under the laws as we have them to deal with situations where there is injury or death involving driving, okay? The consequence of this, in my opinion, is that in some cases, like this one, third-degree murder charges are totally justified, and that is what we believed in light of all the facts as we knew them in this case. I am a great advocate and defender of the independence of the judiciary. We just happen to disagree with the judge who made the decision to throw out the third-degree murder charges and have this matter proceed on lesser charges. So as a consequence, we did our job, which is we came back around and we went to a higher court and asked that court to agree with us, which fortunately that court did. This kind of thing happens. I would say it probably happens 5 or 10% of the time with preliminary hearings. I am not here to say anything about that other than this is our job, and if we honestly believe that charges are justified, we're going to keep coming, even if there is a respectful disagreement with someone in the judiciary. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I suppose also to talk about the time, that this happened March 2022, here we are almost in 2024, but that perhaps it may have been worth it?
Well, it is not at all uncommon that a homicide matter may take as long as 2 or 3 years to get to trial, especially in the wake of the pandemic, which effectively shut down the courts for years. What that meant, even for cases that occurred as the pandemic was waning, is that there was a huge backlog of cases that were being resolved. It's not happy news, but the truth is this timing is actually fairly normal at this point. It is part of the reason that I am hopeful that some of the things that we are trying to do in terms of our budget and in terms of being able to hire and retain the kinds of superb attorneys that you have seen today in this room is so important. But I can tell you that I meet essentially every Friday with the judge who is in charge of criminal, and we work through on an ongoing basis with public defender's office, with private attorneys, with the courts, ways that we can have this system remain careful, but also be more streamlined. There's nothing I would rather see than to be able to take a case that took from March of 2022 and including all the investigation, get that done within a year. And yes, it does take time because we need to make sure in every single case that what happens is the right outcome. Yes, please. Any questions? Any other questions? Yes, please.
Señor fiscal, perdone, si pudiera hablar brevemente sobre la importancia de este caso y la importancia también de la sentencia contra la señora Webb.
Tenemos un caso donde señora Webb manejaba borracha y al mismo tiempo estaba usando su celular para comunicar con otras personas. Mató a 3 seres humanos y a causa de eso va a servir una sentencia mínima de 27.5 años, máxima de 60 años. Tantas vidas afectadas, 3 personas muertas, es una situación horrible, pero a lo menos tenemos un poco de justicia.
Usted no hace una advertencia, una recomendación para aquellas personas que manejen bajo la influencia. Me gustaría si puede repetirlo.
Por favor, señoras, señores, no manejen borracho. Se puede usar Uber, Lyft, taxis. Por favor. no manejen mientras que están usando sus teléfonos celulares. Van a matar a gente, van a destruir sus vidas. Eso puede esperar después de llegar. Okay, sure thing. Anyone else? Yes, please. Morning. So I'm not going to address that question at this presser, but if you'd like to speak with me separately after, I'm willing to do that before you leave the building. All right.
The other two cases, I'm just checking in on, has the escape prisoner who escaped at Jefferson Hospital been apprehended? Is there any sort of update on that? And also, I think there was a shooting on Sisca at the garage wall in Vermont. Supposedly, or allegedly, the suspect stabbed a few people, ran away, and was shot by some training police, or probably suspected in that case.
I am more than happy to speak to you after this presser, and I don't mean in 3 days. I mean, I'll talk to you right after this presser. But out of respect for the survivors of this horrific incident, I don't want to mix that into this presser. Yes, sir.
Would any of the survivors like to speak about this process?
Would you like to speak?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Mack. I am Trooper Mack's widow. From March 21st to current, it's been a whirlwind. From going from multiple versions of ADAs, I'm glad we ended with Jeff and Joanne. From, McShay, I don't think I would be as okay without McShay and Burkhart being on the case. The amount of work that Burkhart supplied, and from the squads that previously worked with my husband to those that died, their careers changed. So to witness that and proceed to go through the grief process, it's different and it's hard to fathom because on top of my grief, my daughter's griefs, watching careers change and be manipulated by such a deviant act that is completely avoidable, but due to negligence and selfishness and blatant disrespect for herself and everybody else on the road, that evening, lives were changed. So from there to now, I'm just waiting until February, and then I can tell my daughters that the danger that killed their father is officially taken care of and behind bars, and that they can breathe a sigh of relief, and that everything that we've done, that Brittany and I have fought for, the events that we go to honor our husbands, their fathers, we did it for a purpose. And we're going into the holiday season with just one more step and one more hurdle. So hopefully by year 2, end of watch, she's starting her 27 and a half years.
I'm Brittany Sisca. I'm Branden Sisca's wife. March 21st, I was 6 months pregnant at the time. Going through that whole process alone is unbearable. It's nothing anyone should ever go through. I had to learn how to be a single mom, first-time mom, and figure out a new normal. Figure out a new normal. And the tireless meetings, phone calls, events. Like Steph said, we do it for a reason. We do it to honor our husbands, our girls' fathers. We do it to spread awareness. We do it for the state. We do it for everybody to know that these guys were absolutely amazing human beings and they were making differences out there. My daughter will never get the chance to even know who her dad was. He never held her. He never saw her. That's a whole other demon down the road I have to handle. But with the help of Steph and the state. Our Blue family is very close. They always check in. They always take care of us. We're grateful for them. We're going to get through whatever hurdle we have and figure out our new normal because it's different every day. To drunk drivers, this isn't okay. There's no excuse to be a drunk driver. And if you say, oh, I only did it once, and I didn't hurt anybody, well, you're still a hypocrite. You shouldn't be doing it in the first place, and you should be ashamed of yourselves for doing it. Please just be careful, because it saves families like us from going through everything we went through.
All right. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your respecting the reality that we have the widows and the sister of people who were killed in this awful incident.